In this video, I'm going to talk about why the House just blocked Donald Trump's policy on banning institutional investors from buying single-family homes. You may remember a few weeks ago, Donald Trump signed an executive order targeting corporate home buyers, trying to prevent them from being able to play in the housing market. Well, now that effort has hit a roadblock in the House. And what happens next could have a dramatic impact on the housing market. So let's get right into it. So first, a quick recap of what the executive order was supposed to do that he signed a few weeks back. 1. The goal was to limit corporations from buying single-family homes. The goal of this was simple: help first-time homebuyers be able to buy more single-family homes, and this order was aimed at reducing the amount of corporations that are able to purchase single-family homes. Now, it should be noted that executive orders in this case do have limitations. They cannot just simply rewrite housing law in the country. That has to go through Congress. And we're going to talk about the reaction in Congress in just a second. But the intention here from the Trump administration was to get reactions from the people that would have more permanent impact than just this executive order. So let's talk about what happened in the House. And to do that, let's go through this article. So here it says, Republicans balked at grafting the ban onto the Housing for the 21st Century Act. French Hill instead wanted to schedule a separate hearing to examine 3 standalone bills that banned investors. And this shows how divisive the proposal has become inside of the GOP. See, shortly before this House vote, the Office of Management and Budget warned that the main bill lacked other presidential priorities, particularly the ban on purchase of single-family homes by large institutional investors, according to a statement from the House member. Now, this bill ultimately passed 390 to 9, while the Senate already approved similar legislation months earlier. And this leaves the White House searching for another option to get this proposal passed. And that means that this was not included in the legislation that passed. And furthermore, when you bring a policy into Congress, policy ideas often change once they move from executive announcement to legislative reality. There are usually many changes that get made before legislation gets passed to permanently enact an executive order. So what's happening here is simply there's a lot of friction in just getting this bill passed. So that's pretty much what happened in the House, just politicians and investors fighting over what we want to pass. But I've got to tell you, this was always going to be a complicated battle to win. And see, investors own a relatively small percentage of housing stock nationally as well, with about 2% of single-family homes owned by national investors. However, as I mentioned in the previous video, this concern varies by region. Some areas have higher saturation of investor-owned homes than others. See, many investors also prefer to purchase brand new construction or just simply build to rent. And something else to be noted is that institutional buyers can actually have a positive impact on the housing market by increasing the demand for new construction homes. And that's why I think this conversation is also important. It doesn't necessarily mean that housing prices would become cheaper if you did this ban on corporate buyers. It doesn't automatically lower prices, given the relatively small impact this would actually have on the housing market supply. But let's talk about what happens if this ban never makes it through Congress. And does anything change for buyers? And then we'll break down, if it did pass, what would meaningfully happen to prices? Would they fall or would they rise? And see, this comes down to basic supply and demand law. When you have more demand for a product, prices naturally increase if the supply cannot keep up. And that's where we are in the housing market right now. Supply cannot keep up with demand, given how much we're underbuilding over the last 20 years. So in my honest opinion, I think even if this ban goes through, I don't see a big impact on the housing market, especially on prices. In some markets, you may actually see a larger impact than others. But even that impact, I think, is going to be minimal given where we are in the housing market. And even if this ban were to pass, it's not going to have any effect on the main problems in the housing market today. Given that we have the lock-in effect that's affecting millions of homeowners every single day, we've got differences in local markets, as I just mentioned, and then there's the institutional capital role that also has an effect. I think the biggest thing that's going to have an impact negatively on the housing market is the lock-in effect. and I've talked about this endlessly on my channel. See, the lock-in effect is simple. Many current homeowners have interest rates from 2020 to 2021 where they're between 2.5% and under 4% interest rates. And when you have interest rates that are hovering around 6 or 7% today, that means those homeowners are less likely to sell and move to a new home even if they want to. That's also something that plays an impact on the ability for buyers to even buy a home right now. With interest rates higher than they have been for a number of years, that reduces the overall affordability. And when you pair that to rising housing prices, affordability becomes even more of a problem. When you've got higher housing prices and higher interest rates, that means higher mortgage payments, which require a higher income to be able to qualify. And you've also got to come up with a higher down payment. So when you combine all of that, I think that's going to have a much bigger impact on the housing market. If we solve that problem, which I've talked about a few things that the administration is floating and a few ideas that I had. One of the ideas that the administration has talked about is a portable mortgage. Now, I've talked about the downsides, the positives, and a supplemental idea that I have come up with to solve that or to help with that lock-in effect problem. And you can check out my channel to see those videos on that topic. But I think overall, if you were counting on this policy alone to help affordability in the housing market, I think whether it passes or not, it's not going to have that big of an impact on the housing market. And I think this also underlines how difficult it could be to actually make major structural changes to housing market policy. There's a lot of money behind this that wants to keep Congress out of making any of these policy changes since it would have a negative impact on them. So no matter what the policy proposal is, I think it's just going to be an uphill battle for most of those to get passed no matter what.